I gave it to Mom. It suits her way better than you.
On the second anniversary of my mom's passing, I returned home and felt a longing to reconnect with her warmth. So I opened the dresser where I kept her keepsake dress. However, I noticed that the dress, along with several of my personal belongings, was missing. Could it have been a burglary? I wondered, and asked my husband, who was working from home, if he had any idea about it. He responded with a casual expression. At first, I couldn't believe my ears. You gave it to your mom. What do you mean? My husband went on, as if to rub salt in the wound. His tone showed no sign of remorse, and it sounded almost proud.
You said it's a keepsake, but you never wear it. A dress is better off being used by someone who will actually appreciate it rather than just sitting there unused.
That's not the point. Why would you give it to her without even asking me?
Stop yelling. Mom was thrilled. What's the problem? I'll buy you something new later, so stop being so selfish.
I was speechless. It wasn't anger, but shock and disbelief that overwhelmed me. How could someone be so completely out of touch with my feelings? He didn't even realize he'd crossed the line.
Well, Mom's happy, so it worked out fine, right?
I couldn't comprehend how this situation could be fine, but my shock turned into a bitter laugh. As long as I stayed married to this man, trouble would never end. I couldn't take it anymore. I silently went back to my room, packed a few belongings and a photo frame with my mom's picture into my suitcase. Then, I told my husband, still casually working from home, let's get a divorce. Without waiting for his response, I walked out of the room and headed quickly to the front door. Then, my husband called out to stop me from behind. But I had no intention of turning back. He had given away my mom's heirloom without asking, dismissing it as no big deal. I couldn't stay with someone like that.
Wait a minute. Don't just walk out.
Realizing I was serious about leaving, he grabbed my arm, but I shook it off forcefully. Don't touch me. You're the one who's selfish. You gave away my mom's dress to your mom without asking, sold my belongings without telling me. I've had enough.
Hey, you don't need to be so mad. I thought it'd be for the best.
He yelled, grabbing my arm again. But I didn't want to hear anything more. I dashed out the door.
Wait. If you leave now, my life will be.
I can't do this anymore. I can't stay with you. My name is Kate, a 30-year-old office worker. I lived with my husband, Jake, just the two of us, with no children. Until recently, my mom had lived with us too, but 2 years ago, she fell seriously ill and passed away. My family wasn't wealthy. In fact, we were more on the poor side. When shopping, my mom would always check prices first, and eating out was out of the question. Even my clothes were mostly hand-me-downs from older cousins, and I could count on one hand the number of times I got brand new outfits. As a child, I remember thinking, we're poor, so I shouldn't be selfish. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school, and my mom raised me on her own. At the time, I was too young to understand why they divorced, but as an adult, I learned that my dad had been a gambling addict, racking up massive debts. I later found out that, even before their divorce, we were living solely off my mom's part-time job income. To me, my dad always seemed like a good father, so I was shocked to learn about that side of him. More than that, I felt anger toward him for causing my mom so much pain. And that's why I've hated gambling, debt, and my dad ever since. Even as an adult, those feelings haven't changed. I went to college on a scholarship, and once I started working, I did everything I could to make my mom's life easier.
You don't need to worry about that. Just focus on doing what you love. Seeing you healthy and happy is enough for me.
She said that to me. But I wanted to repay her even just a fraction of the sacrifices she made for me. The only keepsake my mom left me was a dress that my grandmother had specially made for her. It was an elegant dress with lace on a light purple material, and the fabric was quite high quality. Before she passed, my mom told me,
This dress was a special gift my mom made for me when I turned 18. She stitched every thread with love and care. I want you to have it as my keepsake, Kate.
I kept the dress in a box that my mom had also handed down to me. Sometimes, I'd open the box and reminisce about her. I've been married to Jake for 5 years. He understood my family situation and even got along well with my mom. His parents, Michael and Hannah, were wonderful people who never looked down on me for being from a single-parent household and were always kind and thoughtful. Both my mom and I were happy, feeling blessed to have such a good match. Jake works from home 3 days a week and goes to the office for the other 2, but I had been feeling increasingly uneasy about him. We decided to split the rent and utilities equally, while managing other expenses separately, but he spends his paycheck freely, sometimes making expensive purchases. It seems he isn't the type to save money, and I've had to warn him a few times. Hey, even though we agreed to split the living costs and let each other spend the rest freely, don't you think you're spending too much? We don't have kids yet, and thinking about our future, I think we should use money more wisely. Like, we should start saving now, even a little, for retirement.
I get that you're worried, Kate, but think of it as an investment. Some of the stuff I bought might become valuable in the future, you know? Don't worry, we'll be fine.
But Jake is the kind of person who only cares about the present and doesn't listen. Even if something becomes valuable later, who would buy old, used items unless they're unopened or vintage jeans? Before marriage, Jake had seemed like a responsible person, but after marriage, I started seeing his reckless spending habits. Though he isn't in debt, his tendency to blow through his paycheck every month made me increasingly suspicious. On a spring day, the 2nd anniversary of my mom's death, I hurriedly finished work early and came home sooner than usual. At home, I looked at the photo frame of my mom in the living room and reflected on memories of her. I recalled the time she splurged on my birthday and took me to a fancy restaurant. While helping me get dressed, she shared a story about receiving her own dress from my grandmother.
When I got this dress, I was so happy. Since it was specially made for me, I was nervous the whole time, thinking I shouldn't stain it. I still remember the joy of that moment so vividly.
She smiled as she spoke. She was genuinely happy that I was wearing the precious dress she had kept safe for so long, and that dress held special meaning for both of us. Suddenly missing her warmth, I went to the room where the dress was stored. However, when I opened my closet, the box containing the dress wasn't in its usual spot. It's not here. Did I put it in another drawer last time? But no matter how many drawers or closets I checked, I couldn't find my mom's dress. And it wasn't just the dress. Some of my clothes and watches were missing too. Could we have been robbed? Panicked, I rushed to Jake's home office. It was one of his work from home days, so he should have been home all day. Maybe he had noticed something unusual. My heart pounded as I burst into his room, and he looked at me with a surprised expression.
Whoa, you scared me. What's going on? Why are you so panicked?
There might have been a break-in.
What?
Jake stood up abruptly, looking at me with wide eyes.
Are you serious? What's missing? Is the bank card okay?
My mom's dress is gone. Jake, you were home all day today, right? Did you hear any strange noises? I asked him, flustered and worried. Then, with a calm expression, he said something shocking.
Oh, I gave it to my mom. It suits her better than you.
What? I couldn't believe my ears. What did he just say? He gave it to his mom. What does that even mean? My mind went blank, unable to process what it just heard. As if to twist the knife, Jake continued.
Well, you weren't using it anyway. And my mom said she wanted a new dress, so I thought it'd be perfect and gave it to her.
His tone was unapologetic. Why would you do that without asking me?
You didn't need it, right?
I do. It's my mom's keepsake. I couldn't help but raise my voice, yelling at him. Jake, looking exasperated, glanced at me and sighed.
Come on now. Even if it's a keepsake, you weren't wearing it. Isn't it better for the dress to be used by someone who can appreciate it?
That's not the point. Why didn't you ask me before giving it to her?
Stop screeching. My mom's happy, so what's the big deal?
As I stood there, speechless, he dropped another bombshell.
Oh, and I sold your clothes and watches too.
Wait, you sold them?
Yeah. Remember when I asked if I could sell some stuff you weren't using, and you said it was fine? Sure, I didn't ask this time, but it's all good, right?
I can't believe. I had thought we'd been robbed, but the culprit was right in front of me all along. Listen, I only agreed back then because you said you desperately needed money. But I told you it was a one-time thing, right? I said not to sell anything without my permission. My voice trembled with anger, but Jake looked at me like he didn't understand what was wrong.
Well, it's already sold. I'll buy you something new eventually, so stop being so unreasonable.
I couldn't find the words. I was more stunned and baffled than angry that someone could be this oblivious. Jake didn't seem to realize he had crossed a line.
Well, my mom's happy, so it all worked out in the end, right?
I couldn't understand what was supposed to be fine. But beyond exasperation, I felt a laugh rising from deep inside me. As long as I stayed married to this man, troubles would never stop coming. I couldn't take it anymore. I silently went back to my room, packed a few belongings and a photo frame with my mom's picture into my suitcase. Then I told Jake, who was casually working from home, "Let's get a divorce." He looked startled for a moment, but his expression quickly returned to normal.
Come on, Kate. Have a little more patience. If you get worked up over every little thing, you won't last in this world.
He tried to pacify me, but then a sly grin spread across his face as if he'd thought of something clever.
Or are you pouting because I prioritized my mom over you? That's kinda cute.
As he spoke, he reached out to put his hand on my shoulder. I swatted his hand away and glared at him. "Don't you dare joke around. I'm serious. I'm divorcing you." With that, I walked out of the room and headed swiftly toward the front door. As I was putting on my shoes, he called out from behind me.
Hey, wait a second. You're seriously divorcing me over something like this? You're kidding, right?
But I didn't feel like turning back anymore. He had casually disposed of my mom's keepsake and brushed it off as something like this. I couldn't stay with someone like that anymore.
Hold on. Don't just leave like that.
Realizing that I was serious about leaving, he grabbed my arm, but I forcefully shook him off. "Don't touch me. You're the one who's selfish. You gave my mom's dress to your mom without asking and sold my belongings without permission. I've had enough."
Come on, there's no need to be so mad. I only did it because I thought it was for the best.
He shouted as he grabbed my arm again. But I had no desire to listen anymore and dashed out the front door.
Wait, stop.
As I stepped out, I heard his voice behind me, almost like a scream. I instinctively turned around to see him reaching out toward me, stumbling over his feet as he tried to follow.
If you leave now, what am I supposed to do?
I hesitated for a moment but ignored his words and started walking again.
Hey, wait.
He grabbed my arm forcefully, trying to stop me. At that moment, his face suddenly went pale, his eyes darting to something behind me. Confused, I turned around to see two men with intimidating looks standing there.
"Jake, we've been looking for you."
The taller man said to Jake. The confidence he had moments ago was gone. And he began apologizing to the men.
I'm so sorry.
You're causing us trouble, you know. If you don't pay on the promised date, it puts us in a bind too. We're not running a charity here.
The shorter man said in a stern tone.
"We've already sent you multiple reminders, haven't we? And yet, we haven't heard back. What's going on here?"
I know. I'm really sorry. I'll make sure to pay by the next due date.
Didn't you say the same thing last time? And yet you still didn't pay.
Jake kept apologizing to them. Well, excuse me, but who are you? I asked them cautiously. The taller man turned to look at me and replied,
"Are you his wife?"
When I gave a small nod, he pulled a business card from his inner pocket. Printed on it was the name of a consumer loan company I'd never heard of before.
Your husband took out a loan from us. His repayment deadline has passed, but we haven't been able to contact him. That's why we came here.
A loan? I looked at Jake. He avoided my gaze, looking guilty.
Yes, the payment is due on the 10th of each month.
The man said as he held out a piece of paper in front of me. It listed the repayment terms, and sure enough, his name was on it.
At the very least, we need the interest paid by the end of today. Or, if you'd like, you can take over your husband's debt for him.
The taller man suggested, saying something outrageous. Panicked. I took a step back from the man and moved closer to Jake. What do you mean? Are you saying you've been borrowing money? When I pressed Jake, the shorter man sighed and continued.
Oh, so your wife didn't know? Jake has borrowed over $50,000, and he hasn't made a payment in over 6 months.
I couldn't believe my ears. Even though I knew Jake was careless with money, I never thought he would go as far as taking out a loan. And not just any loan. He had borrowed $50,000. Jake, is this true? When I asked him, he nodded slightly, as if realizing there was no way to deny it.
But even if I can't pay today, I'll definitely make the payment on the next due date.
Hearing his words, the shorter man shot him a sharp glare.
Do you have any idea how many times you've said that? We've been more than lenient, even saying we'd settle for just the interest payments, but you haven't even done that.
I swear, I'll have the money by the next due date. Please, just give me one more chance.
Jake apologized sincerely to these men. The taller man let out a heavy sigh.
You've got until the end of the month. If you don't pay by then, we'll show up at your workplace to collect.
With that, he signaled to the shorter man and turned to leave. Once the men were out of sight, Jake stood up, brushing himself off, and casually turned to me.
Well, that was rough. Can you believe they came all the way to my house to collect?
His earlier fear seemed to have vanished as he chuckled nervously, reaching for the door handle. Wait a second. You're not going anywhere. Start explaining. We moved to the living room, where I demanded answers, and to my surprise, Jake confessed to being addicted to gambling.
Well, I kinda got into gambling, you know.
For a moment, I thought I misheard him. Gambling? And it was clearly more than kinda. Anyone could see that.
See, since I started working from home more, I had a little extra free time. So I stopped by a casino just to kill time, and I hit a huge jackpot right away. Can you believe it? I turned $10 into $500 just like that. Then I tried horse racing, and a $3 bet turned into $300. I realized I might have a real talent for gambling.
According to Jake, his initial winnings quickly turned into losses, and he eventually ran out of money. He then started borrowing from his friends and selling his belongings to fund his gambling. Even giving my mom's dress to his mom was just a pretext to borrow money from her. When I realized he had taken my mom's dress for such a reason, I began trembling with my anger. As Jake continued bragging about his gambling, I slammed my hand on the table. What kind of talent for gambling do you think you have when you've racked up $50,000 in debt? I yelled at him. Jake flinched at my outburst, but quickly reverted to his usual carefree tone.
Come on, that was just bad luck. I'll win big again and pay it all back. No problem.
The same words as my dad.
No problem. I'll pay it back eventually.
My dad used to say the same things. No problem? Are you kidding me? What happened to the money you borrowed or made from selling stuff?
Oh, right about that. Man, when your luck's bad, it's really bad. I lost it all. Now I've got to pay back the people I borrowed from, but I don't have any cash on hand. So, those guys who came earlier, I ended up borrowing a little from their company too. But isn't it weird? I only borrowed $1,000 at first, but somehow it ballooned to $50,000.
Jake laughed nervously as he explained.
Every time I was late on a payment, they sent me piles of reminders. I got so freaked out, I tore them up before you could find them.
What are you planning to do about that $50,000?
Oh, it'll work out. Don't worry.
I raised my voice, cutting him off. Do you even understand how stupid this is? It'll work out? It hasn't worked out, which is why we're in this mess. I told you before we got married, didn't I? Both my mom and I struggled because of my dad. I told you I hate gambling and debt. Didn't I make that clear?
Oh yeah, I think I remember that. But hey, I'm not your dad. Don't worry. As soon as my luck turns around, I'll pay off all the debt.
I was stunned. This was beyond something we could solve by talking. And then, as if to drive the final nail into the coffin, Jake said,
So anyway, Kate, could you lend me $50,000?
as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Something inside me broke at that moment. This wasn't the man I thought I had married. He was no longer rational, sensible, or trustworthy. He was just someone consumed by gambling addiction, a completely different person. Unable to bear staying in the same space as him, I stood up silently, took a divorce form from my bag, and placed it on the table. I can't do this anymore. I'm done with you. I said nothing more and walked out of the house, ignoring his attempts to stop me. Once outside, I headed straight to my in-laws' house. I decided to explain the situation and ask if they could return my mom's dress. When I arrived at my in-laws' house and rang the doorbell, my mother-in-law, Hannah, quickly answered the door.
Oh, Kate, you're here. How unusual for you to visit without calling first.
Her gentle smile made tears well up in my eyes. Hannah, well,
What's wrong? Did something happen?
noticing that something was off, she immediately invited me inside. In the living room, my in-laws sat across from me. I wiped my tears with a tissue before making my request. Hannah, I know this is a lot to ask, but could you please return the dress? Her eyes widened in surprise.
The dress? You mean the one Jake gave me as a gift?
Yes, the truth is, that dress is actually my mom's keepsake. My in-laws looked shocked at my words.
Wait, Jake told me he had it custom made for me. Are you saying that was a lie?
I felt a wave of guilt toward Hannah, who had no idea about the truth, as I explained how Jake had taken my mom's dress. I also mentioned that the dress bore the tailor's signature, proving its origin. Hannah asked me to wait for a moment before bringing the dress out and checking for the signature.
This can't be.
The signature was indeed from the original tailor, and her face turned pale.
So it's really your mother's dress. Kate, I'm so sorry.
Apologies alone aren't enough, but what Jake did was absolutely unacceptable.
My in-laws repeatedly apologized to me in tears. You don't have to apologize. Jake is the one at fault here. As long as I get the dress back, that's all I need. I comforted Hannah, relieved to have my mom's dress returned.
But why would Jake lie and give that dress to Hannah?
They exchanged confused looks, tilting their heads in puzzlement. I then explained to them how Jake had fallen into gambling addiction, secretly accumulated debt, and had loan sharks coming to our house. I also told them that he had taken the dress as a pretext to borrow money from Hannah.
That foolish son of mine.
Jake did something like that?
They trembled with anger. Michael and Hannah, I can't do this anymore. I've decided to divorce Jake. They both let out deep sighs, their faces heavy with sadness.
You're right. What Jake did is absolutely unforgivable. Kate, we are truly sorry.
Once again, they apologized to me. At that time, the phone rang at their house. As Hannah started to get up, Michael gestured for her to stay seated and answered the call himself.
Hello, this is Thompson.
His voice carried through the room, but we couldn't hear the voice on the other end. Still, we could see Michael's face grow darker and more serious as the conversation went on.
Yes, I understand. I'm very sorry. Thank you.
As he hung up the phone, his hand trembled slightly.
What happened?
Hannah leaned toward him, her face filled with concern. He let out a heavy sigh and looked at both of us.
Jake, he's been embezzling funds from his company.
What? Both Hannah and I gasped in unison.
The accounting department found some suspicious transactions. Apparently, he instructed them to change the account for payments from clients to one that isn't the company's.
His voice quivered as he explained.
How much money are we talking about?
Hannah asked hesitantly, and Michael answered with difficulty.
Over $100,000.
$100,000? Our voices overlapped again.
The company has already filed a report with the police. He'll likely be arrested soon.
Michael slumped his shoulders as he spoke.
No, $100,000. What was he thinking?
Hannah was so shocked that she collapsed onto the floor. I was also at a loss for words. On top of $50,000 in debt, Jake had embezzled over $100,000. At that moment, my phone rang. The screen showed it was Jake calling. Hello? I hurriedly picked up, and from the other end, I could hear Jake's panicked voice.
Kate, help me. It's bad. The police are here.
His voice was frantic, and I could hear multiple voices in the background. Noticing my unusual expression, my in-laws held their breath and watched me closely. Jake, I heard you embezzled money from your company. Is that true?
What? How do you know?
Your company just called your parents' house. What were you thinking? First, the debts, and now embezzlement? I can't believe how much I've come to despise you. Jake stammered, trying to make excuses.
I was going to pay it back right away. I just borrowed a little, thinking I could return it before anyone noticed.
Pay it back? You used the company's money without permission and think that's fine? What kind of nerve does that take?
But come on. I thought if I had just a little luck, I could pay it all back quickly. I wasn't trying to steal it. I just borrowed it temporarily with every intention of returning it.
Hearing Jake still try to justify himself made my anger boil over. Return it? With what? More gambling? You racked up $50,000 in debt, embezzled company money, and still haven't learned your lesson? As my in-laws watched anxiously, I continued pressing him. Earlier you said, "I'm not like your dad," didn't you? But you're the same. No, even worse. At least my dad never touched his company's money. I heard Jake stop breathing on the other end. Then, in a small voice, he said,
If only you had lent me the money, none of this would have happened.
My voice rose in response. Do you even understand the gravity of your situation? This isn't just some personal financial dispute. The moment you touched company money, it became a criminal offense. I could hear police officers' voices getting closer, and Jake's breathing became more erratic. You've deceived people and taken things that matter to them. Do you not see that you're the one at fault? Were my mom's keepsake and the company's money just gambling chips to you?
That's not what I meant.
Not what you meant? Then what did you mean? The result is all that matters. You've destroyed things precious to me, betrayed your company's trust, and even hurt your parents. And yet, you're still making excuses? I could hear Hannah quietly sobbing in the background. Jake fell silent on the other end, unable to respond. At that moment, Michael extended his hand.
Kate, may I take the call?
I hesitated briefly before putting the phone on speaker and handing it to him. He sighed deeply before speaking in a heavy tone.
Jake.
Dad, you'll help me, right? Kate's just my wife, so she's an outsider. Blood ties mean family sticks together, right?
Jake's voice became desperate as he clung to his father's words, pleading for help. His tone carried an expectation, as if believing that a father was naturally obligated to help his son. But Michael responded coldly.
I'm cutting ties with you as my son. You stole from your company, betrayed trust, and even took Kate's precious keepsake without her permission.
What? Cut ties? Dad, come on. That's too much. I'm your son. Your real son.
It's because you're my son. As your family, I can't forgive what you've done. As your parent, I bear responsibility for how you were raised. If you're willing to make amends, I'll help. But if not, then you're no longer my son.
Wait. Mom, do you feel the same way?
To pretend Kate's mother's dress was a gift for me and lie like that. That smile you had back then, it was all a lie, wasn't it?
Her voice broke. I could tell she was holding back tears.
Even you, Mom. Why is everyone against me? Why?
Realizing that he had no one on his side, Jake's voice turned pitiful as he finally broke down in tears. But I wasn't about to console him. I think we're done here. This is the end for us. Serve your time and take responsibility for what you've done. Oh, and don't forget to sign the divorce papers. Without waiting for his response, I hung up the call. A heavy silence hung over the living room, broken only by Hannah's quiet sobs.
Kate, I'm so sorry that our foolish son caused you so much trouble.
Michael said as they both turned to apologize to me again. Michael and Hannah, please don't apologize anymore. Jake chose this path on his own. Besides, I'm already grateful to have my mom's dress back. As Hannah struggled to hold back more tears, Michael placed a comforting hand on her shoulder.
Kate, it's late. Why don't you stay here tonight?
I nodded quietly. Thank you, but I'd rather be alone for now. They looked at me with concern but didn't insist. As I headed toward the door, Hannah's voice called after me.
Kate, I hope you'll still come to visit us from time to time.
I turned back and smiled. Yes, of course. You're both very dear family to me. Jake's trial was held not long after. The company pressed charges for embezzlement, and while he was found guilty, he received a suspended sentence due to it being his first offense and showing remorse. After his release, Jake couldn't return to his parents' home and started living alone in a small apartment. Of course, he's been prohibited from contacting either me or his parents. But even more burdensome is the debt he has to repay. On top of the $50,000 loan from the lender, he now owes restitution to the company, bringing the total to an enormous amount. I've heard that Jake now works multiple part-time jobs, including at a convenience store and a bar, to pay off his debts. His current life is a far cry from the one he lived as a company employee. When I returned home that day, I found the divorce papers I'd left on the table already signed by Jake. Perhaps it was resignation, or perhaps it was his way of showing some dignity. Either way, I immediately filed the paperwork. Not wanting to stay in the house filled with old memories, I decided to move and start fresh. I now live alone in a cozy apartment, enjoying a simple but fulfilling life. My in-laws continue to care about me. They invite me to dinner once a month, and sometimes we spend hours chatting over tea. Hannah often tells me, "Kate, you're a cherished part of our family," and Michael nods quietly with a warm smile. We're currently planning a trip together. I'm sure it will feel like a trip with real family, filled with laughter and joy.